My name is Elaine Mitchell, and at 32 I thought I understood how my family worked. As an accountant, I deal in certainties, assets, liabilities, bottom lines. But at our annual family brunch at my parents' Connecticut mansion, those certainties crumbled. While my sister Amanda sat smugly across the mahogany table, our father announced she would inherit everything. Then my phone buzzed, a strange email that would unravel decades of family secrets. If you're watching this from somewhere cozy, drop a comment about whether your family has ever surprised you. Now let me take you back to that fateful Sunday morning. The Mitchell family estate sprawled across 3 acres of pristine Connecticut countryside. The 8-bedroom Georgian-style mansion had been our family gathering place for over 2 decades, ever since my father Richard struck gold in commercial real estate development. With its marble foyer, sweeping staircase, and meticulously maintained gardens, the estate represented everything my parents had worked for and everything they valued. I pulled my modest Honda Civic into the circular driveway that Sunday morning, parking between a Mercedes SUV and a Jaguar, cars belonging to my Aunt Patricia and Uncle James. My sister Amanda hadn't arrived yet. She was perpetually fashionably late. As I stepped out of my car, I smoothed down my department store dress and took a deep breath. These family gatherings always left me feeling like I was still the awkward teenage daughter rather than a successful 32-year-old woman. Amanda, 4 years my senior at 38, had always been the golden child. She had followed in our father's ambitious footsteps, becoming a celebrated neurosurgeon at one of Boston's top hospitals. Her husband William came from old money and worked as a corporate attorney. They had 2 children, perfect, well-behaved twins named Emma and Ethan, who attended an exclusive private school and already showed signs of inheriting their parents' drive and intelligence. My life looked quite different. After getting my accounting degree, I had worked my way up at a mid-sized firm in Hartford. I lived in a small but comfortable apartment downtown, drove a practical car, and had recently been promoted to senior accountant. My engagement to my college boyfriend Michael had ended 3 years ago when he accepted a job in California, and I chose to stay near my family in Connecticut. Since then, dating had taken a backseat to building my career. Our parents never explicitly compared us, but they didn't need to. The evidence was in every interaction: how my father's eyes lit up when Amanda discussed her latest surgical technique at dinner, while my tax season stories received polite nods; how my mother, Diane, herself from a prestigious Boston family, always seemed to direct the conversation back to Amanda's children even when I tried to share news about my promotion. "Miss Elaine, so good to see you," called Martha, our parents' housekeeper of 15 years, as I entered through the side door. "Hi, Martha," I said, giving her a warm hug. The household staff had always been kind to me, perhaps recognizing a fellow outsider in the Mitchell family dynamic. "How's everything been?" Busy. Your mother's been planning this brunch for weeks," Martha said, lowering her voice. "There's something big happening today, I think. Your father's been in his study making calls all morning, and your mother seems nervous." My stomach tightened. My parents had mentioned wanting to discuss family matters when they called to confirm my attendance, and at 72 and 68 respectively, they were reaching an age where estate planning was becoming a priority. I had dared to hope that today might finally be the day I received some recognition from them, some acknowledgement that I too was a worthy heir to the Mitchell legacy. I made my way through the kitchen, where the family chef Thomas was arranging platters of smoked salmon, fresh fruit, and pastries. The dining room table had been set with the heirloom china and crystal glasses. Flowers from my mother's garden formed an elaborate centerpiece. Aunt Patricia spotted me first. "Elaine, darling, still rocking the single professional woman look, I see." She air-kissed my cheeks, her diamond bracelets jangling. "Good to see you too, Aunt Patricia," I replied, used to her backhanded compliments. Uncle James gave me a more genuine greeting, asking about my work and seeming genuinely interested in my recent promotion. My cousins Derek and Samantha were there with their spouses, already sipping miasamas by the French doors that led to the terrace. My parents made their entrance from the main staircase, my father tall and silver-haired in a navy blazer, my mother elegant in a cream-colored dress, her pearls gleaming at her throat. Age had barely touched them. They maintained the same commanding presence they'd had throughout my childhood. "Elaine, you're here," my mother said, giving me a brief hug. "I was just wondering if we should start without Amanda. She texted that they're running a bit late. Emma had a piano recital this morning." "Of course we'll wait," my father said firmly. "This is an important family day." I nodded, feeling that familiar pang of being the less important daughter. Had I been the late one, brunch would have started promptly at 11 as planned. Cousin Derek approached me with a fresh mimosa. "So, what do you think this is all about?" "Mom says Uncle Richard's been hinting at some big announcement." "I'm not sure," I admitted. probably estate planning stuff. They're getting older. Well, let's hope everyone gets treated fairly, Derek said with a meaningful look. He had always been perceptive about the family dynamic. I sipped my drink, gazing around at the house that had been the backdrop to every significant family event throughout my life, the place where I'd learned to ride a bike on the long driveway, where I'd done homework at the kitchen island, where I'd gotten ready for prom. Would part of this place ever truly be mine, or would Amanda, as always, be deemed the more deserving daughter? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Amanda had arrived. The double doors swung open as Amanda made her entrance, looking like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine in her designer sundress. William followed behind her, handsome in casual linen, while the twins dressed in coordinating outfits politely greeted everyone. Sorry we're late, Amanda announced to the room, though she didn't sound sorry at all. Emma was simply magnificent at her recital. The instructor says she might be ready for a solo at Carnegie Hall next year. My mother rushed forward to embrace her favorite daughter and grandchildren. That's wonderful news. We'll have to plan a family trip to New York for the performance. I watched as my father clapped William on the shoulder, the two men immediately falling into conversation about the stock market. I stood awkwardly with my half-empty mimosa, feeling like a guest rather than a daughter in my parents' home. Let's all move to the dining room, my mother announced. Thomas has prepared a spectacular brunch. The spread was indeed impressive: eggs Benedict, Belgian waffles, a carving station with prime rib, various quiches, and an assortment of pastries. We all took our usual seats, my father at the head of the table, my mother to his right, Amanda and her family next to my mother, and me further down, between Uncle James and Cousin Samantha. Elaine, you've lost weight, my Aunt Patricia remarked loudly as we began filling our plates, finally trying one of those meal delivery services. Actually, I've been taking a kickbacking class, I replied. It's a great stress reliever. How interesting, my mother said vaguely before turning to Amanda. Now tell us more about Emma's recital. Was it the Chopin piece she's been practicing? I stabbed at my eggs Benedict as Amanda launched into a detailed account of her daughter's musical prowess. Beside me, Uncle James gave me a sympathetic look. How's work going? He asked quietly. I brightened slightly. Really well, actually. I just got promoted to senior accountant last month. I'm now managing our firm's largest corporate client. That's fantastic, Uncle James said sincerely. Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said you had a good head for numbers. The mention of my grandfather warmed me. Grandpa Mitchell had been the one person in the family who seemed to truly see me. Before his death 5 years ago, he would often tell me that being practical and hardworking were virtues the family needed more of. Not everyone can be a shooting star, he said once, glancing meaningfully toward Amanda. Some have to be the North Star, reliable, constant, true. I was about to respond to Uncle James when my father cleared his throat, drawing the table's attention. While we're all here, he said, I wanted to mention that the Wilson property finally closed. Biggest deal of the quarter. Congratulations, Richard, William said. What was the final number? My father named a figure that made several people at the table murmur appreciatively. I saw an opportunity and took it. That's amazing, Dad. Actually, at work, I just helped structure a tax strategy for a similar commercial acquisition that saved our client over $2 million in liability. There was a brief pause before my father nodded. Good for you, Elaine. Speaking of taxes, William, what do you make of the new corporate rate adjustment? And just like that, my professional achievement was acknowledged and dismissed in the same breath, the conversation shifting away from me once again. As the meal progressed, I found myself mentally revisiting scenes from childhood, Amanda's ballet recitals that required the entire family's attendance, while my debate team championships were often attended only by Martha, who would drive me when my parents had prior commitments. The summer my parents took Amanda to Europe to broaden her horizons before medical school, while I stayed home with my grandparents. The way my mother kept a scrapbook of Amanda's press mentions and awards, displayed proudly in the living room, while my accounting certification hung only in my own apartment. More mimosa, Elaine, Cousin Samantha offered, pulling me from my thoughts. No thanks, I'm good, I replied, trying to stay present and positive despite the familiar feelings of inadequacy creeping in. The conversation shifted to my parents' upcoming plans. My mother mentioned their winter in Palm Beach, and my father began talking about stepping back from day-to-day operations at his company. I've been thinking more about legacy lately, he said, his voice taking on a serious tone that caused a hush to fall over the table, about what Diane and I have built, and how it will carry on after we're gone. My heart began to race. Was this the important family matter they had hinted at? We're not getting any younger, my mother added, placing her hand over my father's, and there comes a time when one needs to make certain decisions. Amanda straightened in her chair, while William nodded solemnly. The twins, bored by adult conversation, had been excused to play in the garden, their laughter occasionally drifting in through the open windows. "Richard," my Aunt Patricia prompted, "is there something you want to share with the family?" My father looked around the table, his gaze lingering on Amanda and then passing over me before he nodded decisively. "Yes," he said, "after dessert I'd like everyone to join me in the study. Diane and I have some announcements to make regarding our estate planning." The table erupted in murmurs. My cousin Derek caught my eye across the table and gave me an encouraging nod. I tried to smile back, but my stomach had tied itself in knots. This was at the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. Would my parents finally see me as an equal to Amanda, or would this brunch end like so many family gatherings before it, with me driving home alone telling myself that I didn't care about their approval anyway? "Let's have dessert on the terrace," my mother suggested, rising gracefully. "It's such a beautiful day." As we moved outside, Amanda sidled up next to me. "Exciting, isn't it?" she said, her voice lowered. "Dad's finally making it official." "Making what official?" I asked, though I already sensed what she meant. She gave me a patronizing smile. "Oh, Elaine, let's not pretend. We both know how this works." She patted my arm before walking ahead to join William, leaving me frozen on the terrace steps. In that moment I knew what was coming, and I knew it wouldn't be fair. The Mitchell family study had always been my father's domain, a masculine space of leather-bound books, hunting trophies, and the lingering scent of expensive cigars. As a child, being summoned to the study usually meant some kind of trouble or disappointment. Today, as we all filed in after dessert, that same sense of dread washed over me. My father took his position behind the massive mahogany desk, my mother standing supportively at his side. The rest of us arranged ourselves around the room, Amanda and William on the leather sofa directly across from the desk, my aunt and uncle in the wingback chairs, cousins leaning against bookshelves, and me somehow left standing awkwardly by the door as if I were an afterthought. "Thank you all for joining us today," my father began, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used in board meetings. "As you know, Diane and I have been blessed with success beyond anything we could have imagined when we started out. We've worked hard to build something lasting. Something that would secure the future for generations of Mitchells to come." I noticed a thick folder on his desk labeled Mitchell Family Trust, and my pulse quickened. "After considerable thought and many discussions with our financial advisors and attorneys, we've finalized our estate plans," he continued. "We wanted to share the broad strokes with all of you today, to avoid any confusion or surprises down the road." My mother nodded encouragingly beside him. I searched her face for any hint of what was to come, but her expression remained pleasantly neutral. "The Mitchell estate, including this property and the majority of our investment portfolio, will pass to Amanda upon our deaths," my father announced, looking directly at my sister, as the one who has established a family of her own and demonstrated the kind of financial responsibility and success that reflects our family values. She is best positioned to preserve and grow the Mitchell legacy. Amanda's face registered fake surprise, followed by a practiced look of humble gratitude. William placed his hand over hers in a show of supportive partnership. "Of course," my father continued, finally glancing in my direction, "we've made provisions for Elaine as well. A trust fund has been established that will provide a reasonable income enough to supplement your salary, Elaine, and ensure you're comfortable." The room seemed to tilt around me. A reasonable income sounded suspiciously like the kind of arrangement you'd make for a distant relative or a family friend, not for a daughter who should have been an equal heir. "Dad," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, "what exactly does that mean in terms of numbers?" My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "Amanda will receive the estate valued at approximately $12 million. Plus the majority share of Mitchell Developments. Your trust is structured to provide annual distributions of $75,000, with the principal remaining under the management of the family office. $75,000 annually compared to $12 million plus ongoing business interests. The disparity was staggering. "May I ask why?" I managed to ask, fighting to keep my voice steady. My father's expression hardened slightly. "It's simply practical, Elaine. Amanda has a family to raise, a position to maintain in society, the twins' education alone." "And I don't count as family?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "That's not what your father meant," my mother interjected smoothly. "It's just that your needs are different. You've always been so independent with your career and your apartment in the city. So I'm being punished for being independent? I asked incredulously. My father sighed. No one is being punished. These decisions weren't made lightly, Elaine, but Amanda has always shown more natural aptitude for managing wealth and maintaining the family's social position, and frankly, when you broke things off with Michael, we had to reconsider certain aspects of the plan. We had hoped you'd start a family of your own by now. The injustice of it burned in my chest. I was being disinherited because I was single and childless because I hadn't conformed to their idea of what a Mitchell daughter should be. Amanda spoke up, her voice dripping with false compassion. Elaine, I know this might seem unfair now, but I promise I'll always look out for you if you ever need anything. Don't. I cut her off, unable to bear her patronizing tone. Just don't. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My cousins exchanged awkward glances. Uncle James looked like he wanted to say something but remained silent under my aunt's warning glare. Just then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Grateful for the distraction, I pulled it out to silence it, but the notification caught my eye. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Ultrafuntimus.com. The subject line made my breath catch. The truth about your grandfather's will. Is there anything else to discuss? I asked, suddenly desperate to be alone. My father looked relieved at my apparent acceptance. No, that covers the essentials. Our attorney will be in touch with both of you to go over the specific documents. If you'll excuse me, I need to use the restroom, I murmured, already backing toward the door. I practically ran down the hallway to the powder room, locking the door behind me before sinking onto the closed toilet lid. My hands shook as I opened the email. I know what really happened to your grandfather's will, it read. Your sister isn't the rightful heir. Your father altered the documents after your grandfather's death. I have proof. Meet me at the Blue Door Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you want to know the truth. Come alone. I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading and rereading the message. Was this some kind of cruel joke, a scam? But how would a scammer know about my family's inheritance issues, the timing of today's announcement? My mind raced back to my grandfather's death 5 years ago. There had been tension between him and my father in those final months, arguments behind closed doors that would abruptly stop whenever anyone else entered the room. At the time, I'd assumed it was just the natural friction between two strong-willed men. But what if it had been something more? I splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself before returning to the study. Looking in the mirror, I made a decision. I would meet this mysterious Emmeller tomorrow. What did I have to lose? When I returned, the mood had lightened somewhat. My father was pouring brandy for the men, while my mother and aunt discussed an upcoming charity gala. Amanda was showing cousin Samantha pictures of the twins on her phone. Life was continuing as if my world hadn't just been shattered. Are you all right? Uncle James asked quietly, approaching me with concern in his eyes. I'm fine, I lied, just needed a moment. He lowered his voice further. For what it's worth, I think your grandfather would have handled things differently. He always spoke very highly of you, Elaine. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Across the room, I noticed my father and Amanda slipping out onto the terrace together, heads bent in private conversation. Something about their secretive body language sent a chill down my spine. I moved closer to the French doors, pretending to admire a painting while straining to hear their conversation. Handled it better than expected, my father was saying. She's always been practical, Amanda replied, unlike him. Well, it's done now. The papers are signed. There's nothing anyone can do to change it. Do you think she suspects anything about? They moved further away, their voices fading beyond my hearing. Suspects anything about what? The strange email suddenly seemed less like a scam and more like a lifeline. I made my excuses shortly after, claiming a work emergency that required my attention. No one seemed particularly disappointed to see me go. As I drove away from the mansion, I glanced back at it in my rearview mirror, the house I had grown up in but would never inherit. By this time tomorrow, I might know whether I had been cheated out of my birthright. The family brunch had given my sister a mansion. All I had gotten was a strange email and perhaps the key to the truth. Back in my apartment, I couldn't focus on anything. I reread the mysterious email a dozen times, analyzing every word for clues about the sender's identity or motives. The address ultrafuntimus.com gave nothing away. Was it really someone who had known my grandfather? Or was this an elaborate hoax? I pulled up my calendar from 5 years ago, searching for details around the time of Grandpa Mitchell's death. He had passed away in March, after a brief battle with pneumonia complicated by his existing heart condition. The funeral had been large and dignified, attended by hundreds of people from the business world and local community. My grandfather had been well respected, known for his integrity as much as his business acumen. I remembered how stoic my father had been throughout the service, barely showing emotion until we were alone at the cemetery after most guests had departed. It had been one of the few times I'd seen him vulnerable. Amanda had been there too, of course, making a tearful speech about our grandfather's influence on her life, though in reality, she had rarely visited him in his final years, always too busy with her residency and later her practice. 2 weeks after the funeral, the family had gathered for the reading of the will. I recalled my surprise when my grandfather's longtime attorney, Mr. Harrington, announced that my father would be the executor of the estate, with the bulk of the assets passing directly to him rather than being divided among the grandchildren as Grandpa had often hinted would be his plan. At the time I hadn't questioned it. Grief had clouded my judgment, and my father had always handled the family's legal and financial matters. If there had been anything unusual about the proceedings, I hadn't noticed it. But now certain details began to stand out in my memory: the strained expression on Mr. Harrington's face as he read the will, the way he had avoided making eye contact with me specifically, and most telling, the argument I had overheard between my father and Mr. Harrington in the hallway afterward, my father's voice low but intensely angry. "This is final, Harold. There will be no further discussion." Mr. Harrington had retired almost immediately after settling my grandfather's estate, moving to Florida without the customary retirement party that would have been expected for someone of his standing in the community. At the time, it had seemed like a natural desire to enjoy his golden years in a warmer climate. Now I wondered if there had been more to his abrupt departure. I pulled out my laptop and searched for Harold Harrington, finding several people with that name in Florida. Without knowing which city he had moved to, it would be difficult to narrow down. I would need more information. My phone buzzed with a text from Cousin Derek. "You okay? That was rough today." I appreciated his concern but wasn't ready to share my suspicions. "I'll be fine," I texted back, just disappointed. "For what it's worth, Dad thought it was messed up too," came his reply. I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. "Derek, do you remember anything weird about Grandpa's will reading, or Dad and Grandpa arguing before he died?" There was a long pause before Derek responded. "Now that you mention it, there was that big blow-up at Christmas, about 3 months before Grandpa died. I was in the kitchen and overheard them arguing in the study. Grandpa said something like, 'You can't control everything. Richard and the girls deserve equal treatment.' Dad told me to forget about it when I asked later." My heart raced. This aligned perfectly with the email's implication. I thanked Derek and promised to call him soon, my mind already spinning with possibilities. Night fell and sleep evaded me. I kept thinking about my grandfather, how he had always made a point of treating Amanda and me equally, giving us the same gifts at Christmas, setting up identical college funds for us. He had been the one person in the family who seemed immune to Amanda's charm offensive, seeing through her practiced perfection to the calculation beneath. One memory in particular kept surfacing: my 25th birthday, 7 years ago. Grandpa had taken me to lunch, just the two of us. Over dessert, he had grown serious, talking about his hopes for the family legacy. "Your father and I don't always see eye to eye on what matters," he had said. "He believes in empires, in accumulating wealth and influence. I believe in fairness, in giving people what they earn through their own merit and character." He had taken my hand then, his eyes intent on mine. "Remember, Ellen, there are many forms of inheritance. Some are written on paper, but the most important ones are written in how we live our lives." At the time, I had thought he was simply giving me grandfatherly wisdom. Now I wondered if he had been trying to prepare me for something he saw coming. Morning arrived with no clarity, just the certainty that I needed to meet this mysterious Emmeler. I dressed carefully in professional attire, a navy pantsuit that gave me confidence, and arrived at the Blue Door Cafe 20 minutes early. I chose a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance and ordered a coffee to calm my nerves. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman entered the cafe. She appeared to be in her 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and the poised demeanor of someone accustomed to professional environments. She scanned the room, her eyes finding mine with an intensity that suggested recognition. "Elaine Mitchell?" she asked, approaching my table. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. "And you are?" "Margaret Winters," she said, sitting down and placing a leather portfolio on the table between us. "I was your grandfather's legal secretary for 23 years. I worked alongside Mr. Harrington on all of Charles Mitchell's legal matters, including his final will and testament." My breath caught. "You sent the email?" "Yes." She studied my face carefully. "You look like him, you know, same eyes, same determination." "Why contact me now?" I asked. "It's been 5 years since my grandfather died." Margaret glanced around before lowering her voice. Because I made a promise to myself that I would stay out of it unless I saw a grave injustice being done. Yesterday, my neighbor who works as a caterer for your parents' events mentioned the announcement that was planned for the family brunch. I knew I couldn't remain silent any longer. What exactly are you claiming happened? I needed to hear her say it directly. Your grandfather's actual will left his estate to be divided equally between you and your sister, Margaret stated firmly. He believed in fairness above all else. But your father and sister conspired to present a different document after his death, one that gave your father control of everything, with the understanding that Amanda would eventually inherit the lion's share. The accusation hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to reject it outright. Surely my own father and sister wouldn't commit such fraud, but another part, the part that had always sensed the hidden currents in my family, found the scenario all too plausible. That's a serious allegation, I said carefully. Do you have any proof? Margaret opened her portfolio and removed several documents protected in plastic sleeves. I kept copies, she said simply, and knew something wasn't right when Harold suddenly announced his retirement after the will reading. He'd been planning to work another 5 years at least. Then when he moved to Florida without so much as a goodbye to the staff, I started connecting the dots. She slid the first document across to me, a copy of a will dated just 2 months before my grandfather's death. I scanned it quickly, my heart pounding as I read the key provision to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Elaine Mitchell and Amanda Mitchell Stevens. This is different from what was read at the executor meeting, I whispered. Yes, compare the signatures. She showed me the official will that had been filed with the probate court. The signatures look similar but not identical. Someone had forged my grandfather's signature on a revised will. I also have these, Margaret continued, showing me emails between my father and Amanda dating back 6 months before Grandpa's death. The messages were carefully worded but clear enough when read with this new context. They had been planning to alter the will, worried about my grandfather's increasing irrationality and wanting to divide his estate equally between his granddaughters. One email from Amanda particularly stood out. Dad, I've taken care of the Harrington situation. He won't be a problem. The retirement package you offered was too good to refuse. Florida was a nice touch. I felt physically ill. Why would they do this? Margaret's expression softened with sympathy. Your father was in financial trouble, overextended on several development projects that went south during the recession. He needed your grandfather's liquid assets to shore up his companies. And Amanda, well, Amanda has always known how to align herself with power. But why not just ask Grandpa for help? He had refused. Your grandfather was old school, believed in weathering financial storms through hard work and scaling back, not bailouts. He didn't want your father using his life savings to rescue bad investment. I sat back, trying to process everything. What do you expect me to do with this information? That's entirely up to you, Margaret replied. I've fulfilled my obligation to your grandfather by ensuring you know the truth. What you do now, whether you confront your family, take legal action, or simply use this knowledge to understand them better, that's your choice. She slid a business card across the table. My contact information. I'm retired now, but I'm willing to testify if it comes to that. As Margaret prepared to leave, she paused, reaching into her purse. One more thing. Your grandfather asked me to give you this if anything ever seemed not right with his affairs. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Without another word, she squeezed my shoulder and left the cafe, leaving me alone with the evidence of my family's betrayal and a letter from beyond the grave. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The envelope contained a single sheet of my grandfather's personal stationery, the Mitchell family crest embossed at the top. His handwriting, once strong and decisive, showed signs of the weakness that had affected him in his final months. But the message was clear. My dear Elaine, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong with my final wishes. I've always admired your quiet strength and integrity, qualities that remind me of myself in my younger days. While Amanda dazzles, you endure. While she performs, you build. I fear your father doesn't see your true value. He's always been seduced by flash and ambition, even at the expense of substance. I've tried to instill better values in him throughout his life, but some lessons can only be learned through consequences. My true will divides my estate equally between you and your sister. If this hasn't happened, then something is terribly wrong. Margaret and Harold have copies of all the correct documents. Trust them. Remember what I've always told you, true inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about values, about doing what's right even when it's difficult. I trust you to uphold the best of the Mitchell legacy, whatever form that takes. With love and faith in you. Grandpa Charles. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring my vision. Even from beyond the grave, my grandfather had tried to protect me, to ensure I was treated fairly. His words confirmed everything Margaret had told me and validated the suspicions I'd barely allowed myself to acknowledge. I gathered the documents she had left, the true will, the emails between my father and sister, and several photographs she had taken of my father meeting with someone who appeared to be a document examiner in a hotel lobby 3 days after my grandfather's death. The evidence was compelling, if not definitively conclusive on its own. My first instinct was to confront my family immediately, to storm into my parents' house and demand justice. But the accountant in me knew better. This situation required strategy, not emotion, and needed advice from someone who understood both the legal implications and the family dynamic. I called Jessica Reynolds, a lawyer friend who specialized in estate litigation. We had met at a professional networking event 2 years ago and had maintained a casual friendship, occasionally meeting for happy hour to discuss our careers and personal lives. "This is significant," Jessica said after I laid out the situation over coffee at her office later that afternoon. She had canceled her last appointment of the day to see me, sensing the urgency in my voice. "If what these documents suggest is true, your father and sister have committed multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, possibly elder abuse if your grandfather was being manipulated near the end of his life." "What are my options?" I asked. Jessica tapped her pen against her legal pad. "Legally, you could petition the court to invalidate the current will and accept the earlier one as your grandfather's true last testament. With Margaret's testimony in these documents, you'd have a strong case. But it would mean a very public, very ugly legal battle with your family. These cases can drag on for years, drain resources on all sides, and permanently destroy relationships." She hesitated. "Is that something you're prepared for?" I thought about family holidays, about future weddings and funerals, about the twins who were innocent in all of this. Did I want to be the one who tore the family apart, even if I was justified? "What else can I do?" "You could approach your father and sister privately first, present what you know, see how they respond. There might be a way to negotiate a settlement that honors your grandfather's wishes without going to court." That approach made sense to my analytical mind. Gather more information, assess their reaction, then decide on next steps. "There's one more avenue we should explore," Jessica suggested. "Let's see if we can find any additional witnesses to corroborate what Margaret has told you. Did your grandfather have any close friends or business associates who might have known about his true intentions?" I thought for a moment. There was Walter Graham, his best friend since college. They played golf every Saturday, and Elizabeth Chen, his executive assistant before he retired. She stayed in touch, used to bring him homemade soup when he was sick. "Perfect. Let's track them down before you confront your family. The more supporting evidence we have, the stronger your position will be if negotiations fail." Over the next 3 days, I took a leave of absence from work and dedicated myself to building my case. Walter Graham, now 83 but sharp as ever, confirmed that my grandfather had explicitly told him about his plans to divide his estate equally between Amanda and me. "He was proud of both of you girls," Walter told me over lunch at his retirement community, "but he worried that Amanda had too much of your father in her, that hunger for more, never satisfied with what she had. He saw you as the steadier hand, the one who would preserve rather than consume." Elizabeth Chen shared a similar story. "Mr. Mitchell changed his will about 6 months before he died," she confirmed. "He was very clear about wanting equality between you and your sister. He even made a point of telling me about it because he was so pleased with the decision." Most damning of all was my conversation with Harold Harrington himself. Jessica had tracked him down to a retirement community in Naples, Florida. Initially reluctant to speak with me, he finally agreed to a video call after I mentioned Margaret Winter's name. "I should have stood my ground," he admitted, his face lined with regret. "Your father, he threatened to ruin my reputation, claimed he had evidence I had mishandled client funds. It wasn't true, but at my age, with retirement so close, I couldn't face a legal battle that would drain my savings and end my career in disgrace." "So you helped him substitute a fake will?" Harold looked away from the camera. "I didn't forge anything myself. I simply didn't object when the document that was presented at the reading didn't match the one I had helped your grandfather prepare. Your father paid for my silence with a very generous retirement package. Have you regretted it every day since? Would you be willing to sign an affidavit stating this?" Jessica, who was sitting off camera, asked. After a long pause, Harold nodded. "Yes, it's time I made this right. By the end of the week, I had assembled a compelling case: the original will, testimony from my grandfather's secretary, his best friend and his assistant, a sworn statement from his attorney admitting to the cover-up, and the incriminating emails between my father and sister. The final piece fell into place when Jessica discovered that one of the witnesses who had supposedly signed the fraudulent will, a man named James Peterson, had actually been in the hospital on the date indicated on the document. His signature had been forged as well. "You're ready," Jessica told me on Friday afternoon. "Do you want me to be present when you confront them?" I considered it but shook my head. "No, this needs to be family first, but I'd like you to draft a formal legal notice that I can present if they refuse to acknowledge what they've done." Jessica agreed, and we scheduled a meeting for Monday to review next steps based on how the confrontation went. That night I called my mother and asked if I could come to dinner on Sunday. "Just the family," I specified. "I have something important to discuss." "Of course, darling," she replied, sounding pleased. "I'll tell your father and call Amanda." 6 o'clock. As I hung up, I wondered if she had any idea about what her husband and daughter had done. Had she been complicit in the deception or just another victim of their manipulation? Either way, by Sunday evening, the truth would finally come to light. I would reclaim my rightful inheritance, not just the material assets, but the moral legacy my grandfather had entrusted to me. Sunday arrived with a strange sense of calm. I had expected to feel nervous about the confrontation ahead, but instead, I felt centered and resolved. The truth was on my side, along with my grandfather's faith in me. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, funeral appropriate, I thought with grim humor. The portfolio of evidence sat on the passenger seat of my car as I drove to my parents' house, the familiar route now feeling like a journey into unknown territory. Martha answered the door, her warm smile faltering slightly when she saw my serious expression. "There in the dining room, Miss Elaine. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I assured her, giving her hand a quick squeeze. The scene in the dining room was painfully normal: my mother arranging flowers, my father reading something on his tablet, Amanda and William discussing the twins' summer camp options. They all looked up as I entered, and I wondered how I had never before noticed the subtle way they positioned themselves as a unit, with me perpetually on the outside. "Elaine, you're right on time," my mother said, coming forward to kiss my cheek. "We were just saying how nice it is to have a quiet family dinner." I set my portfolio on the sideboard and took a deep breath. "Before we eat, I'd like to talk about something important." My father's expression immediately became guarded. "Can it wait until after dinner? Your mother has gone to a lot of trouble." "No, Dad, it can't wait. It's about Grandpa's will." The room went still. Amanda's smile froze, and William straightened in his chair. My father's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, a tell I recognized from childhood, when he was anxious but trying not to show it. "What about it?" he asked carefully. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steady. "I know that Grandpa's real will divided his estate equally between Amanda and me. I know that you and Amanda conspired to prison a fraudulent document after his death, and I have proof." Amanda laughed, the sound brittle and false. "What are you talking about? This is absurd." I turned to the portfolio and began laying out the evidence piece by piece on the dining room table: the original will, the emails, the photographs, the sworn statements. With each document, the color drained further from my father's face, while Amanda's expression hardened into something ugly and defensive. "Where did you get these?" my father demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "It doesn't matter where I got them. What matters is that they're real, and they prove what you did." My mother had gone very pale, her hand at her throat. "Richard, what is this?" For the first time I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes as he looked at his wife. "Diane, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted. "Can you explain why you forged Grandpa's signature, why you bribed his attorney to stay quiet, why you and Amanda planned this deception months before Grandpa even died?" Amanda stood up so suddenly her chair toppled backward. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Dad was saving the family business. Without access to Grandpa's money, we would have lost everything." "Amanda," my father warned, but it was too late. Her outburst had confirmed everything. I turned to my mother. "Did you know about this?" She shook her head slowly, looking from my father to Amanda with growing horror. "I knew there were financial problems, but I thought Charles had agreed to help before he died." "That's what you told me, Richard." My father wouldn't meet her eyes. "I did what was necessary to protect our way of life." "Your way of life, Diane." William, who had remained silent until now, stood up. "I think I should take the children home. This is a family matter." His careful phrasing made it clear that family didn't include me. I was now the enemy. "No," I said firmly. You should stay, William. After all, you benefited from this fraud too. The prestigious address, the vacations, the private schools for the twins, all paid for with stolen money. William's face flushed. I had no knowledge of any of this. Really? Not even when Amanda told Dad she had taken care of the Harrington situation? You weren't curious about what that meant? His expression told me everything I needed to know. My father had recovered some of his composure. What exactly do you want, Elaine? Money, is that it? We can arrange something discreetly. I want justice, I cut him off. I want what Grandpa intended me to have, an equal share of his estate, not some insulting allowance. And if we refuse? Amanda challenged. I smiled thinly. Then first thing tomorrow morning, my lawyer files a petition to invalidate the current will on grounds of fraud. The evidence goes to the probate court, with copies to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Harold Harrington has already agreed to testify. You would do that to your own family? My father asked incredulously. You did this to our family when you chose to steal what was rightfully mine, I replied. I'm just setting it right. My mother had moved away from my father, standing alone by the window. All these years, she whispered, the separate trusts for the girls, the different treatment. I thought it was your decision, Richard, your judgment about what was best, but it was fraud from the beginning. I was protecting us, my father insisted. Charles was becoming sentimental in his old age, making irrational decisions. Elaine had never shown any aptitude for wealth management. Giving her half would have been irresponsible. That wasn't your decision to make, I said quietly. It was his money, his legacy, and you wanted us to share it equally. Amanda's face had transformed into something I barely recognized, cold, calculating, almost predatory. You won't go through with this, she said dismissively. You've always been weak, Elaine, always afraid of confrontation. You'll take whatever settlement Dad offers because you don't have the stomach for a real fight. Her words might have wounded me once, but not anymore. You're wrong, Amanda, I've changed. Or maybe I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be, someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Exactly the person Grandpa believed I was. I turned back to my father. Here are my terms. A new trust is established that divides Grandpa's original estate equally, as he intended. The mansion is sold, and the proceeds split between Amanda and me. The family business remains yours until your retirement, at which point Amanda and I each receive equal shares. You have until tomorrow at noon to agree, or I file the lawsuit. You can't be serious, Amanda sputtered. What about my children? They're counting on that inheritance. Your children will still be very well provided for, I replied calmly, just not at my expense. My father studied me for a long moment, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time. You really would go through with this? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway, yes, I would. He nodded slowly, the fight seeming to drain out of him. I'll call my lawyer in the morning. Richard, Amanda protested, you can't just give in. He silenced her with a look. Enough, Amanda, it's over, we've been caught. The admission hung in the air between us. My mother moved to pour herself a glass of wine with shaking hands. William looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I gathered my evidence back into the portfolio. I'll expect to hear from your attorney tomorrow, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. I wish you had both been the family I deserved. As I walked to the door, my mother followed me. Elaine, wait. Her voice was unsteady. I truly didn't know. I turned to face her. But you suspected, didn't you? All those years of unequal treatment, the favoritism, the different expectations for Amanda and me, you went along with it. Tears filled her eyes. I thought it was just your father's way. I should have questioned more, advocated for you better. I'm so sorry. Her apology was sincere, I could tell, but it came too late to heal decades of feeling secondary in her affections. Still, it was a start. We'll talk more later, I promised, softening slightly. This isn't the end of our relationship. It's just a reset on more honest terms. As I drove away from the mansion, I felt no triumph, only a complicated mix of sadness, vindication, and surprisingly freedom. The family I had known was irrevocably changed, but perhaps the family we might become, one built on truth rather than deception, would be healthier in the long run. My phone rang as I pulled onto the highway. It was Jessica. How did it go? She asked. They agreed to my terms. My father will have his attorney contact you tomorrow. That's surprisingly easy. I was prepared for more resistance. I smiled grimly. The evidence was too strong, and in the end, I think my father still cares about his reputation more than anything. A public fraud case would destroy that forever. So what happens now? Now, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years, I start building my own legacy, one that would make my grandfather proud. 6 months after that fateful confrontation, I stood in the light-filled office of my new business, Mitchell Financial Integrity Advisors. The name was deliberate, a reclaiming of my family name and a statement of the values I intended to uphold. The settlement had been finalized with surprising speed once my father accepted the inevitable. The Mitchell mansion had been sold to a tech entrepreneur for slightly above asking price. My share, just over $6 million, had been placed in my control, with a portion invested and the rest used to launch my new venture. I had decided not to join my father's real estate development company, even though the settlement guaranteed me an equal ownership stake with Amanda upon his retirement. Instead, I sold my future interest to a venture capital firm, using those funds to establish my business. My company would focus on helping middle-class families build sustainable wealth through ethical investing and financial planning, the antithesis of the high-risk, high-reward approach my father had always favored. The relationship with my family remained complicated. My mother and I had begun the slow work of rebuilding trust. We met for lunch every other week, carefully avoiding difficult topics at first, then gradually moving toward more honest conversations about the past and how we might forge a healthier relationship going forward. "I always admired your independence," she admitted during one of these lunches. "I just didn't know how to show it when your father and Amanda were so dominant in our family dynamic." My father maintained a polite distance, sending occasional emails about business matters but otherwise respecting my desire for space. I knew it would take time, perhaps years, before I could fully forgive him. If ever, the betrayal had been too calculated, too prolonged. Amanda was another story entirely. She had never apologized, insisting until the end that she had only done what was necessary to protect the family's interests. After the settlement, she had stopped speaking to me altogether. Her children, my niece and nephew, were the innocent casualties of this rift. I sent them birthday and Christmas gifts, hoping that someday, when they were older, we might have a relationship independent of their mother's bitterness. Surprisingly, other family members had rallied around me. Uncle James called regularly to check in, and Cousin Derek had become something of a confidant. I always knew there was something off about how Grandpa's estate was handled. He told me, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." I had also found unexpected allies in the business community. Margaret Winters had introduced me to several of my grandfather's old associates, who remembered him fondly and were eager to support his granddaughter's venture. Their mentorship proved invaluable as I navigated the challenges of entrepreneurship. As I arranged the framed photo of my grandfather on my desk, a candid shot of him laughing during a family vacation, his eyes crinkling with genuine joy, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. If not for that mysterious email arriving during brunch, I might never have discovered the truth. I might have continued accepting less than I deserved, believing the story my father and sister had crafted about my place in the family hierarchy. My office door opened and Jessica walked in, now both my friend and the legal counsel for my new business. "The last of the paperwork came through," she announced, placing a folder on my desk. "You're officially the sole owner of Mitchell Financial Integrity Advisors. How does it feel?" I smiled, running my fingers over the embossed company logo, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Jessica perched on the edge of my desk. "Have you heard from your father recently?" "Just the usual formal email. I think he's still processing everything." "And Amanda?" I shook my head. "Radio silence. William sends the occasional update about the twins, but that's it." Jessica studied me carefully. "Any regrets?" The question gave me pause. Had I destroyed my family for money? Was the inheritance worth the broken relationship? "No," I said finally, "not about seeking justice. The only thing I regret is that it was necessary at all, that my father and sister created a situation where I had to choose between accepting their betrayal or standing up for what was rightfully mine." I picked up my grandfather's photo, tracing his familiar features. "The funny thing is, I've realized the inheritance wasn't really about the money. It was about recognition, acknowledgement that I was just as much a part of the Mitchell legacy as Amanda, that my contributions, different as they were from hers, had value." "Your grandfather would be proud," Jessica said softly. "I hope so." I set the photo back in its place of honor. "He taught me that true inheritance isn't measured in dollars or properties. It's about the values you choose to embody, the principles you refuse to compromise." My first client was due to arrive soon, a middle-aged couple looking to plan for their children's college education while still saving for their own retirement. Regular people with regular dreams, the kind my father had always considered too small to bother with. But I knew better. I knew that helping a family achieve financial security, to build something lasting for the next generation, was work worth doing. As I prepared for the meeting, I thought about that strange email that had changed everything. Margaret had risked her own comfort and security to ensure justice was done. Her courage had inspired my own. Now, I hope to pay that forward by building a business that helped others stand on solid financial ground, making choices based on integrity rather than greed or fear. The betrayal I had experienced at the hands of my own family had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. In losing what I thought was my family, I had found myself. In fighting for my inheritance, I had discovered my purpose. The true legacy my grandfather left me wasn't the money, it was the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. That was an inheritance no one could ever take away. The family brunch had given my sister a mansion. I had gotten a strange email, but in the end, I had gained something far more valuable: the freedom to create my own legacy on my own terms. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about finding your worth and standing your ground. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's written on paper, but what's written in your heart.